The colony ship Ardent Vale had been dying for 6 hours before it finally gave up. Mira Voss knew this because she had been counting. 6 hours, 14 minutes, and an unknown number of seconds since the Vrakthi warships had appeared from the dark side of Kareth 9's moon like sharks rising from black water. 6 hours since the emergency klaxons had torn her from sleep. 6 hours since her mother had shoved her into an escape pod with nothing but a thermal blanket, a ration pack, and the words, "I'll find you, baby. I promise I'll find you." Her mother had not found her. The pod had crashed in the rust-colored valley between two ridgelines of broken obsidian rock, and Mira had crawled out into alien air that smelled like burnt copper and something sweeter underneath, something almost like rain. She was 9 years old. She was alone, and somewhere above the bruised orange clouds, her mother's ship was either captured or destroyed, and Mira didn't know which was worse. She pressed herself against the side of the wrecked pod and tried to think like her father used to tell her to think. Slow down, little navigator. The universe doesn't run away. List what you know. What she knew. Kareth 9 was a contested border world. The Vrakthi had been fighting the Colonial Alliance over it for 3 years. Humans weren't supposed to be here. Her family had been aboard a science vessel, studying the planet's strange magnetic anomalies, operating under a temporary research permit that was probably worthless now. What she knew. The atmosphere was breathable for humans for short periods, maybe 8 hours before the high nitrogen content started causing disorientation. She had a breather mask in the pack. She should ration it. What she knew. The temperature was dropping. The sky was going from orange to a deep and threatening purple. Something on this planet had a night cycle, and she did not want to be in the open when it came. What she didn't know. Everything else. She pulled the thermal blanket around her shoulders and peered over the edge of the ridge. The valley below was a maze of rock formations that looked almost architectural. Tall, flat-sided pillars of black stone that jutted from the ground at strange angles, some leaning against each other like exhausted soldiers. There were gaps between them, dark channels, possible shelter. She started moving. She had been walking for 20 minutes when she first heard it. A sound, high and thin and oscillating. Not quite a cry, not quite a mechanical alarm, but something in between. Something alive. Mira stopped walking. Her heart was doing something complicated in her chest. She had learned, in the 3 months her family had spent traveling to this system, that life on contested border worlds came in 2 categories, the kind that ignored you, and the kind that very much did not. The crew of the Ardent Vale had told stories during meals, dark, cautionary tales that were probably exaggerated but probably weren't. She should keep moving. She should find shelter and stay small and quiet and wait for a rescue signal. She took 3 steps toward the sound instead. It was coming from behind a fallen pillar of rock, a massive slab that had cracked off its base and now leaned at a 45-degree angle, creating a low triangular space underneath. Mira crouched, moved carefully, and looked through the gap. Inside the shadow, curled against the rock, was a child. At least, Mira thought it was a child. It was small, roughly her own size, but its body was wrong in ways that her brain took a moment to process. Its skin, if it was skin, had a quality like the inside of an abalone shell, pale and shifting between colors depending on how the dying light caught it. Its limbs were slightly too long. It had 4 fingers on each hand. Mira could see that much, and they were gripping the rock with an intensity that made the knuckles, if they were knuckles, look almost translucent. Its head was large, slightly teardrop-shaped, with enormous dark eyes that were currently squeezed shut. Its mouth was open in that oscillating, pain-filled cry, and Mira could see that its teeth were very small and very many. It was hurt. She could see that. One of its legs was bent at an angle that made Mira's stomach clench with sympathetic nausea, and there was something dark, not quite blood, more like a dark oil, seeping from a wound on its side. Mira crouched there for a full minute, completely still, watching. The child, creature said some part of her brain, but she pushed that word down hard, didn't seem aware of her presence. It was too lost in its pain, or its fear, or whatever combination of both was making that sound. List what you know, her father would have said. It's hurt. It's alone. It's small. It's scared. What does that make it? Her father had been a biologist. He'd had an answer for that, she thought. He would have said something quiet and certain, the way he said most things. It makes it something that needs help. Mira took a breath of the copper-sweet air, tucked the thermal blanket more firmly around her shoulders, and crawled under the rock. The creature's eyes flew open when Mira got close. They were extraordinary, not just large, but somehow deep, like looking into water rather than at a surface. There was an iris in there, somewhere, a ring of amber or gold, but it was hard to focus on. It screamed, not the oscillating cry from before. This was sharp and high and absolute, the sound of something that believed, completely, that it was about to die. It tried to scramble backward and gasped, a wet, terrible sound, when its broken leg caught the ground, and then it went very still, its chest heaving, its dark eyes fixed on Mira. Mira did not move. She had learned this from watching her father work. He'd studied creatures across 4 systems, and she'd sat beside him through enough field observation to understand the first and most important rule. Stillness is the language of I am not a threat. Every creature in every ecosystem in every star system understood stillness. Movement meant predator. Movement meant danger. Stillness meant something else. She sat cross-legged on the gritty ground, the thermal blanket pooling around her, and she waited. The creature stared at her. Its breathing was ragged. The dark fluid was still seeping from its side. Mira very slowly reached into her pack. The creature flinched, a full-body shudder, but didn't try to run again. She found what she was looking for, the emergency medkit, compact, designed for human biology, probably useless for whatever this was, but it had one thing she needed. She extracted the roll of BioSeal bandaging, a wide, slightly elastic fabric designed to apply pressure and promote clotting, and held it up where the creature could see it. The creature watched the bandage. Mira tore a strip. She pressed it against her own forearm, demonstrating, she hoped, and then held it toward the creature's side without moving closer. The creature looked at her arm, looked at its own wound, looked at her face. Mira kept her expression as open as she could. She thought of the way her father looked at things in the field, curious, gentle, profoundly non-threatening. She tried to borrow that look. Very slowly, the creature extended one trembling 4-fingered hand toward the bandage. Mira let it take the strip. She watched as it pressed the fabric against its side, copying her gesture exactly, pressing with those strange, translucent knuckled fingers. The oscillating cry had stopped. It was looking at her with an expression she couldn't name, something that might have been wondering. "Hi," Mira said softly. The creature startled at her voice, but didn't retreat. "I'm Mira," she said. She touched her own chest. "Mira." The creature watched her hand. Then, very carefully, it touched its own chest with those 4 fingers. "Sethe," it said. The word came out wrong for human ears. Too many resonances at once, like a chord played on a strange instrument. But Mira heard the shape of it. "Sethe," she said, making it flatter, more human. "Okay, Sethe." Something in the creature's face shifted. Not a smile. Its face wasn't built for that. But something around its eyes changed, some tension released. They couldn't talk. Not really. Sethe's language was layered sound, harmonics and resonances that Mira's vocal cords couldn't reproduce, and whatever she could manage in human speech, Sethe clearly heard as a single flat note, like music compressed until it lost all meaning. But they could talk in other ways. Mira pointed at the sky and made an explosion gesture with her hands. Sethe understood immediately. The large eyes narrowed, and she made a low sound that Mira interpreted as yes, I know. I was there too. Sethe pointed at the dark fluid still seeping through the bandage, and then looked at Mira questioningly. Mira pointed at the medkit. Then she made what she hoped was a universal gesture, a slight forward tilt. "Hands open, may I?" Sethe looked at the kit for a long moment. Then she made a gesture that Mira watched carefully. She lifted one hand, palm outward, fingers spread. It wasn't quite human, but it was recognizable enough. "Yes, come closer." Mira moved in slowly, holding the medkit open so Sethe could see everything inside. She found the tissue adhesive, designed for human skin, probably not ideal, but better than nothing, and applied it carefully to the edges of the wound, watching Sethe's face for signs of pain or distress. Sethe made small sounds throughout, but she didn't pull away. Her eyes stayed on Mira's face the whole time, that deep watching focus that felt less like wariness now and more like study. When Mira sat back, Sethe looked at her wound, then at Mira, then back at her wound. She made a sound, 3 descending tones, low and warm. It was the first sound she'd made that didn't contain any fear in it. "You're welcome," Mira said, even though she didn't know if that's what Sethe had meant. The purple sky deepened to black with extraordinary speed. Whatever Kareth 9's rotation rate was, it was faster than Earth's. The light went in under an hour, and with it went what little warmth the day had carried. The temperature dropped like something had cut a wire. Mira shivered inside her thermal blanket. Across from her, Sethe made no sound, but her opalescent skin shifted color, the bright shifting iridescence muting, going flatter, the colors retreating toward gray. She was cold too, Mira realized. The color change was biological, involuntary, a sign of heat loss. Without thinking, Mira unfolded the thermal blanket and held one edge out towards Sethe. Sethe looked at the blanket, looked at Mira, made a low sound. "It reflects body heat," Mira said, knowing Sethe couldn't understand the words but wanting to fill the silence with something. "It's not magic. You have to be under it." Sethe reached out and touched the mylar surface of the blanket with 2 fingers, apparently fascinated by the texture. Then she looked at Mira again. "Yeah," Mira said. "Together. It works better together." She scooted closer. Sethe watched her approach with those deep amber eyes, still and measuring. And then, when Mira was close enough to feel the warmth of her, she was warm. Actually, warmer than a human, body heat pouring off her skin like a slow fire. Sethe leaned sideways and pressed her shoulder against Mira's. Mira froze for a second, startled. Then she pulled the thermal blanket over them both. Under it, she could feel Sethe's breathing gradually slow. The shivering, if that's what the tiny tremors in Sethe's limbs had been, eased. The night pressed in around the rock. Things moved in it. Mira could hear them, scraping and clicking sounds in the dark, the occasional low call from something large and distant. She gripped the blanket tight. Beside her, Sethe was completely still, and Mira understood without knowing how she understood that Sethe was doing the same thing she was doing. Listening, assessing, calculating. "How did you end up here?" Mira wanted to ask. "Were you on the ship too? Are there others looking for you?" She couldn't ask any of that. Instead, she sat with the questions, watching the darkness. After a while, Sethe reached down and picked up a small flat stone from the ground. She scratched a shape on the rocky surface beside her. A curve, a line, another curve. Mira looked at it. She didn't recognize it. Sethe pointed upward, at the sky. Mira looked at the shape again, then at the night sky, and the strange stars visible through a gap in the clouds. "Is that a map?" she asked. "Are those stars?" Sethe made a sound, not the frightened oscillation from before, not the warm, descending tones of gratitude. This was something in between. Something like yes, and also watch. She scratched another shape beside the first. Then another. A constellation Mira didn't know, rendered in rough lines on rock. She pointed to the third shape, the smallest cluster. Then she pointed to herself. "That's where you're from," Mira said softly. Sethe touched the scratched star shape with the tip of one finger, very gently. Then she looked up at the sky, and her skin shifted colors in a way Mira was starting to associate with feeling. The iridescence blooming back up through the gray, warm gold and violet running in waves across her face. "Me too," Mira said. She didn't point at any star. She just touched her own chest, where the feeling lived. "I have somewhere I'm supposed to be too." The sound came at the 3rd hour of night. Low. Rhythmic. A vibration more than a noise. Mira felt it in her sternum before she heard it with her ears. Sethe went rigid beside her. Mira had learned to read Sethe's body language enough to know that rigid meant something specific, not the frozen stillness of caution, which was calm at its core. This was rigid the way a wire is rigid right before it snaps. This was fear. Mira slowed her breathing. She listened. The sound was getting louder. And now there was a second component. Footsteps. But wrong. Too many of them, in a pattern that suggested either something with 6 legs or something walking with mechanical assistance. And underneath it all, a wet sound, a rhythmic clicking like teeth. She couldn't see anything. The darkness outside their shelter was absolute. She reached very carefully into her pack. The emergency beacon was in there, a compact cylinder that would broadcast a wide-spectrum distress signal. She'd been afraid to use it. A distress signal would bring rescue, yes, but it would also bring the Vrakthi if any of their ships were still scanning the surface. She'd been trying to calculate odds, running the numbers in her head for hours. Rescue versus capture. Signal versus silence. The footsteps were closer now. 20 meters, maybe. 15. Beside her, Sethe made a sound so quiet it was barely there. A subsonic hum that Mira felt rather than heard. Her skin was cycling through colors rapidly now, the iridescence flickering like a signal lamp. And then Mira understood something. The color cycling wasn't random. Sethe was doing it deliberately. She was sending a signal, or trying to, a biological signal, color and frequency, broadcasting something into the dark. Mira watched the patterns repeat, watched Sethe's face, intent and focused, directing the light outward toward where the sound was coming from. The footsteps slowed. Stopped. A long silence. The clicking had quieted. Whatever was out there was listening. Sethe maintained the light pattern, steady and repeating, like a heartbeat. Then the footsteps resumed, but different now. Receding. Moving away, back into the dark, the sound diminishing until even the subsonic vibration was gone. Mira let out her breath in a long, shaking exhale. Sethe's skin gradually stilled, the color patterns settling back into their resting iridescence. She turned to look at Mira, and she made a sound, that three-note descending tone, warm and low, that Mira had started to think of as okay. Safe. Rest. What was that? Mira whispered. Sethe made a gesture, 2 fingers walking, then a flat hand pressing down, gone away, and then she touched her own chest and made a small sound that Mira thought might be the equivalent of I told it this space was taken. You spoke to it, Mira said. In the light. Sethe tilted her head. She picked up the flat stone again and scratched quickly on the rock. Not stars this time. A rough rendering of the creature, long and low with many legs, and next to it, a smaller shape that was clearly meant to be Sethe. Then she drew a line between them. And below the line, she drew a shape that wasn't quite a word or a symbol. It was more like a picture of sound. Wavy concentric circles, emanating from the Sethe shape, reaching the creature shape, and then the creature shape turning and walking away. You talk to it, Mira said again, differently this time. Not surprise, understanding. You have a language with the things here. Sethe looked at her drawing for a moment. Then she scratched out the picture of herself and drew 2 shapes instead. Herself, and, beside her, a rough shape that Mira slowly recognized as meant to be human. 2 heads, 2 bodies, the line between them, and the creature unchanged. We talked to it, the drawing said. Together. Mira looked at the picture for a long time. We make a pretty good team, she said finally. Sethe made a sound she hadn't made before. Quick, light, high-pitched, gone in a moment. Mira stared at her. It had sounded, improbably, almost exactly like laughter. Dawn on Kareth. 9 came the way a secret comes, gradually, and then all at once. The sky went from black to a bruised indigo, then to deep red, then to the orange amber that Mira was already starting to think of as Kareth, 9 normal. With the light came warmth, and with warmth came the sounds of the daytime world. Distant calls, movement in the rocks, a wind that picked up from the north and carried the burnt copper smell in waves. Sethe had slept for a few hours in the deep night. Mira hadn't slept at all, but she didn't feel tired in the way she expected. She felt instead like something inside her had been tuned to a higher frequency, alert and very present in her own body, aware of every sound and shift of light. She spent the early hours of dawn examining her options. The emergency beacon. She'd been thinking about it all night. The risk calculus felt different now. Before last night, she'd been alone, and alone meant the only person endangered by a signal was herself. But Sethe was here, and Sethe's leg was badly broken. Mira had looked at it properly in the night when Sethe was sleeping, and it needed more than bioseal and a makeshift splint. It needed medical equipment she didn't have. But a beacon would attract the wrong kind of attention too. She was turning this over in her mind when her communicator, a personal unit, short range, which she hadn't tried since the crash because she'd assumed it was useless, beeped twice. Mira grabbed it so fast she nearly dropped it. Any survivors in Sector 7, please respond on emergency channel. This is the Colonial Alliance rescue vessel Kareth Actual. We are performing a surface sweep. Static. Then again, any survivors. Mira pressed the respond button so hard her thumb hurt. This is Mira Voss, she said, her voice coming out steadier than she'd expected, than she felt. I'm in the Valley sector, I'm alive, and I have someone with me who needs medical attention. She paused. Please don't be Vrakthi. 3 seconds of static that felt like 3 years. Mira Voss. This is Commander Te Lund aboard Kareth Actual. We are Alliance. Your mother is aboard this ship. Please activate your location beacon. The world tilted. Mira stopped. Pressed her lips together. Did not cry, because Sethe was watching her and she wanted, very specifically, not to cry. My mother. She's here. She's been searching since the pod separated. Activate your beacon, Mira. She activated the beacon with shaking hands. She turned to Sethe. Sethe had been watching the communicator during the exchange, her large eyes moving between the device and Mira's face, reading something in Mira's expression that her words couldn't carry. Now Mira looked at her, and Sethe looked back, and they had a conversation with no words at all. Help is coming for me, Mira's face said. Sethe's opalescent skin shifted through a slow cycle of colors, gold to violet to a deep, luminous blue that Mira hadn't seen before. She made the low, warm, 3-note sound. I'm glad for you, it might have meant. Will you be safe? Mira's face asked. She touched Sethe's arm, very gently, and then made a questioning gesture, looking around, looking at Sethe's broken leg. Sethe made a scratching motion with her fingers on the rock. Wait, I'll show you, and drew quickly. 2 figures far away, moving toward a central point. Her own shape, and another shape like it. There are others. They're coming too. Your people, Mira said. You have someone coming too. The deep blue in Sethe's skin warmed toward gold. They sat together while they waited. Mira showed Sethe things from her pack. The ration bar, which Sethe sniffed carefully and then handed back with an expression of polite revulsion. The small photo Mira kept folded in an inner pocket, her family outside a research station on a green world, everyone squinting at the sun. Sethe studied the photo for a long time, her fingers hovering over it without touching, and then looked up at Mira with those deep amber eyes. She touched the photo, very gently, with one finger. Then she touched Mira's chest, just briefly, where the feeling lived. Yeah, Mira said. That's them. The Alliance shuttle came from the east, skimming low over the rock formations, and Mira stood up and waved with both arms until it banked and turned toward her position. And from the opposite direction, the north, where Sethe had pointed when she drew her map, came another sound. Different engines, a ship Mira didn't recognize, smaller and faster, in colors she couldn't name. 2 ships, converging on the same broken valley. Sethe stood up beside her, leaning heavily on Mira's shoulder, her broken leg held carefully off the ground. Her skin was cycling through every color it knew, all of them, running in waves. The full iridescent spectrum from gold to violet, to blue to something at the edge of Mira's vision that might not have been visible to human eyes at all. Mira understood, suddenly, that Sethe was doing something deliberate again. A signal, like the one that had sent the creature back into the dark. But different. This one wasn't protection. This one was declaration. We are here. We are alive. We found each other. The Alliance shuttle touched down 30 meters away. The hatch opened before it had fully landed, and Mira's mother came through it at a dead run, still wearing her emergency suit, her hair loose, her face a landscape of fear and relief and love that Mira felt hit her like a physical force. She ran too. Her mother's arms closed around her, and Mira let herself be held, pressing her face into her mother's shoulder, breathing the familiar smell of her, the specific human warmth that was nothing like the burnt copper of this world, nothing like the sweet alien warmth of Sethe beside her. Baby, her mother said. Just that. When Mira pulled back enough to see, she looked past her mother's shoulder to where the smaller ship had landed. A figure had come down its ramp, larger than Sethe, the same opalescent skin, moving with a speed that betrayed a fear as raw as Mira's mother's had been. Sethe made a sound Mira had never heard from her, piercing and bright and absolutely joyful, and launched herself toward the figure on her one good leg, and was caught. The 2 figures held each other in the shadow of their ship. Mira watched from inside her mother's arms. Then Sethe turned, still held, and looked across the space between them. The distance felt vast, and also like nothing at all. She made the 3-note sound, low, warm, descending, and this time Mira heard a 4th note in it, one that hadn't been there before. She didn't know the language. She would never know the language, not completely. But some things are spoken in frequencies that don't need translation. We survive. That is the important thing. We survive, And we remember the ones who helped us survive. Mira pressed her hand to her own chest. Yeah, she said softly. Same. The orange sky stretched over them both, indifferent and vast, and in it somewhere the stars of two different homes were burning, invisible in the daylight, but there, always there.